Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm going to be sharing some stories with you of things that I navigated through in the past. And it really is in the past. I was talking to a friend about it on the weekend, and she's like, "Do you share these stories? Do people know that you went through these things?" I'm like, "Not unless it's OG followers who have been around for the full 8 or 9 years that I've been showing up online." And she's like, "You should share them because that's a lot of things." And this is just three things that I'm going to share today uh, of the many wild experiences that I found myself that came into my life, that happened inside of my body, that I sought help for and tried to figure out why it was happening and lived with it in some cases for long periods of time until I realized that I had to find the solutions myself and walk myself through it and draw the wisdom from it and move forward. And these are some of the biggest lessons of these times in my life and how I get to live now, having actually resolved them. Many of these things that a lot of people say you can't resolve. And I invite you now, if you've ever been told that about anything, to reject it because your capabilities go way beyond this physical reality. So, if you haven't been around for very long, you may not know that I used to, for lack of a better word, suffer from a whole array of chronic health issues, mainly throughout my later part of my 20s. Now, I know now that this was mostly brought on by being on the pill for many years, by drinking a lot, by taking drugs, by suppressing bad experience after bad experience after bad experience, just having all of these emotions pushed down and down and down and down and down, and stress of trying to get by and work crazy, stressful jobs and a whole array of things. Probably not eating very well because I never had any money to eat well at all. I racked up a good 10 grand or more on health bills and hospital bills and doctors and specialists and healers and all these different things. Funny enough to find that the solutions were actually quite simple and didn't cost a lot of money. But I had been labeled with so many different things at a certain point with no solutions or no clear outcome or end game from the medical world that I eventually had to figure it out myself. And luckily, we were entering the age of information where there's so much information online. And this is before there was, I would argue now, too much information online that it gets uber confusing. So I was kind of lucky that I got to start learning about the most important things, which I'll touch on a little bit later, that helped just redirect me and put me on a new trajectory that ended up saving my life, healing my life, and presenting the woman you see today. But at a certain point, I had been diagnosed with IBS and leaky gut and a whole array of food sensitivities that I just couldn't eat, or I would actually feel like I was dying. I had all these different reproductive pains and problems with my cycle. I had multiple kidney failures. I had multiple UTIs. I got gout in my foot, which is only supposed to be received and experienced by very old men. So that was a good one. And I went through months of getting hives all over my skin and no one could tell me why. I had thrush for months at one point. That's not a good time, especially not in the middle of summer when you don't have air conditioning. Any ladies who know. Uh, all of this started getting worse and worse and worse. And then I started getting fibromyalgia, which, if anyone doesn't know, it sucks. It's like chronic pain, but it's like your whole body spasms and locks up. So I would get a pinch in my shoulder, but that would lock up my whole one side of my body. So all the way from my toe up through my knee, wrap around my hip, up through my ribs, up through my shoulder blades, through my neck, and sometimes into my face. I would just have pain and I would barely be able to move half my body. And no one could tell me why. And it was a great time. I had chronic fatigue diagnosed many years prior because I got glandular fever on a night out kissing a boy. And this was around the time I'd started my job at one of the biggest companies in the world. So I couldn't quit. I couldn't take time off. So I had to work through it. And I developed chronic fatigue syndrome. And if anyone knows what that is like, I used to call them glandular naps, where I could tell that my whole body within 5 minutes was about to shut down and I was going to have to sleep. And I would just have to do that. Like they would find me sleeping in the back room. I would be on the beach in front of my house and I would be like, oh God, it's happening. And I would just make it across the road and inside my house before I passed out on the couch or sometimes on the floor. It was wild. And no one could tell me what was going on. They just was like, no, this is just going to be with you forever. So then I started developing chronic anxiety and having panic attacks if any little thing went wrong, on top of everything that I was trying to figure out that no one could help me with, which then, of course, started to develop into clinical depression. And by the time they started talking about bipolar for me, I was pretty lucky, because at this point I had started learning about the mind. I started learning about metaphysics. I started learning about the power of the story that we tell on our physical body. And I'd started learning about hormones and the microbiome, our gut, and how powerful this is for all of these issues. And in later years, they actually found a massive benign tumor. They call it a fibroid, huge, size of a baby's head, inside my uterus. And they only found it because I accidentally fell pregnant. And that would have been growing in my uterus probably for all of those years. And that was probably all of the symptoms I was having, from the reproductive failures to the kidneys to the fibromyalgia and the fatigue and the anxiety and all that. But no one ever sent me for a scan. Like I said, that was the victim story part of it. That was a very nutshell rant on what it was. And I'm not even going to get into how it was. I'm sure anyone who has had even a touch of sickness in their life can imagine times that by years, every single day, living mostly on your own, trying to figure things out as a 20-something-year-old, getting your heart broken all the time, feeling like that. That's not great. And somehow I got through it. And some of the most powerful things that I learned, I'm not going to touch on the physical stuff that I did today. You can find me anywhere online and we can have a chat about that privately. I have beautiful protocols and health programs that I'm partnered with that are so transformational, that saved my life, and that are so freaking simple and cheap as well. And today I really want to talk to you about the mental shifts that I made that really made the difference. Because I did only make very simple physical changes, and they were powerful because they helped me just to get that like light at the end of the tunnel. Oh my God, my physical body has experienced a lift, to be able to delve into the mental stuff. And there are two concepts that I talk about a lot inside my programs and with my clients and we work with. One of them is called secondary gain, and the other is our human needs. Tony Robbins, OG, talks a lot about our human needs, and we have 7 different primary human needs that we're always unconsciously trying to meet, so that we feel safe, so that we feel grounded in this world. And most of us in the world, and I was one of them, are meeting those needs unconsciously in really unhealthy ways. And when we can start to recognize how we might be unconsciously meeting our needs because of eating badly, not taking care of our body, talking terribly to ourselves, like not seeking better health advice, whatever it is, whatever the behavior might be that we're just doing on autopilot, maybe because it's what we've been taught to do, that's actually not creating a result and maybe even digging us a bigger hole. It's highly likely you're actually meeting, and I was meeting, an unconscious need to feel connection, to feel significance, to feel variety, to feel what are the other ones? I always forget these. To feel growth, to feel significance, to feel a level of contribution in this world. And I, by continuing to create sickness in my body, and that's what I was doing, that's what we all do. We create sickness and disease in our body unconsciously, usually through the food we're eating, the thoughts we're thinking, the emotion that we're suppressing, the stress that we're just living with and not doing anything about, the little symptoms that we're ignoring, all because of just how we were set up for this life. No one knew this stuff when we were younger, right? So it's not anyone's fault. It would be better, of course, if, they didn't put a gazillion chemicals in every single thing that we touched or consumed or looked at or breathed these days. And we work with it, right? And there is a way through it despite all of that going on in the world. So I started to recognize that as I was learning about the human needs, by continuing to stay sick and to not ever devote myself to the solutions that apparently were helping, to not pay real attention to the holistic health side of things and the metaphysical side of things, and just keep bouncing back to the same systems again and again that weren't working, I was meeting my need for love and connection as a pretty lonely girl in my later 20s, when I had to stop drinking and partying and going out because I literally couldn't stay awake or move sometimes because of the pain. And so I'd cut myself off from a lot of love and connection of community. And of course, we were all in our 20s, so no one was really coming to check on me. And I was really great at putting on a brave face. So by continuing to get sick and stay sick and have all these new symptoms that needed to be looked at and checked and looked into, I was guaranteed to be seen, to be heard, to be held, to be supported, to be nurtured by nurses, by doctors, by people just around the corner, especially as a woman myself who didn't live near her family. My family were overseas and I was broke and I couldn't just go see them wherever I wanted to at the time. So I was meeting my need for love and connection by being sick and continuing to be sick. I was meeting my need for significance from having all these problems. And at the time, I felt really insignificant. I felt insignificant in my work. I felt insignificant with men in friendships. And so I was meeting that need by having this sickness all through my body. I realized after a while that if I got better, I would not have these needs met for love and connection or for significance. Right? I was meeting my need for variety, for uncertainty in another way, by having multiple different types of symptoms, by having symptoms that no one could figure out, that had a million possible solutions. There's a whole bunch of variety that came with this. I was meeting my need for growth because I was learning all these new things by creating sickness in myself. And I was even meeting a need for contribution, as I was an inspiration for a lot of others who had the same issues, because I had all these issues, but I was always positive and trying to find a way. If I got better, what my brain would realize is you're not going to get all those needs met anymore. And so on an unconscious level, what's actually happening is what we call secondary gain. So this is a concept in the neurolinguistic programming world in which I studied. Secondary gain essentially means that we are gaining something from having the problem that we have. And anytime I bring this up with new clients who are just getting used to the concept, or anyone who has no idea what it is, they're like, why would I possibly be gaining something from having this problem? I don't want this problem. I want it to go. I want to get rid of it. I know. And your unconscious, your brain, which loves and needs to keep you in the familiar, it needs to keep you in what it knows, is gaining something by keeping the problem. Right? So aside from the fact that we're gaining all of these human needs being met, that we're not getting met in other ways for whatever reason, the unconscious mind is actually gaining security. It's gaining safety. It's gaining certainty that we are going to be okay. Because whether you've been super healthy in the past, or maybe you've never really accessed how incredible your body is designed to feel, your brain doesn't know that you can also meet all of your human needs by getting healthy, by getting better, by solving whatever problem it is that you're facing. And so when our brain doesn't see familiarity and where we want to go to, the outcome and the goal we want to achieve, it sees anything in that direction as life-threatening. And it will be so incredibly creative in the stories that it tells us to keep us doing the things that keep us sick or in the problem. to keep us defaulting to old behaviors or reactions or conversations or behaviors that we do that we may not even realize that we do. And so I had to start to realize what I was actually gaining from staying sick, all the needs that I was meeting by staying sick. And so not only did I look at the physical body and go, okay, how can I massively turn things around here on a physical level, which will create some inspiration in my mind, at least, that I can do something about this. And this is so important. Like if you are in the whole of your problems right now and it feels hopeless, start with the body. Like it can feel impossible to start with healing and mindset work if you are getting the flu every week, or if you are feeling super run down, or if you have any of the problems that I experienced. So take control of the physical body, gut health, like moving your body, drinking filtered water, eating alive foods. Don't touch anything that is processed. Get off processed sugars, get organic as much as possible. Yes, I know it's expensive, and pick your heart, right? Like it's going to be expensive if you get sicker and sicker and sicker and you end up with the C word or anything else, and you're up for tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? It's one way or the other. And at some point we have to take action because no one else will, sometimes including the medical system. We love them for when we need surgeries, like I had to have eventually. And for the rest of the stuff, they're getting better, but not really. So two main things that I did was call myself out for what I was gaining with love and compassion, for doing the best that I could with the awareness that I had, and started to ask, how can I get these needs met in healthier ways so that I can tell my brain that I don't need to keep this sickness, that I can tell my brain that I don't need to keep this anxiety or this depression. And the more I did this in combination with like physical practices and no longer talking about all my problems as well, big one, changing the story, quit talking about it with everyone, big one. I got better and better and better. And one issue disappeared and then the other and then the other. And I was like, it happened so quickly. Like it made my head spin. I remember I had a 2-month journey to India planned with a friend, and we were supposed to be volunteering in the foothills of the Himalayas. And I was so sick 6 weeks out from that trip that I literally was like, well, if this new thing that I'm going to try doesn't work, I'm prepared to die in India. That was my mentality. That was how bad it had gotten. I was like, I'm prepared to die. At least I would have gotten to India. That's it. And I got to India and everyone else was getting sick around me, and I was just getting healthier and healthier and healthier. And it just kept going and going. I just kept peeling back the layers of the physical and the emotional and finding all these beautiful ways to meet these needs for love and connection, for significance, for variety, for certainty, for contribution, for growth in healthy ways. And that was a huge year for business and showing up online. That was when I first started my affiliation with the health program that I still am part of to this day and saved my life, right? And so if this speaks to you, I'm wondering what your unconscious, what your brain might be gaining in regards to your human needs from having the problem that you have. Is it that you have something to talk about with your friends who always gossip about people? Is it you're always getting hugs because you got hurt by another guy? You know, oh, poor you, pity party, which feels good in the moment, but it never actually solves the problem, right? So what are you actually gaining that you may no longer get from your brain's perspective if you were to solve the problem? Because of course you're going to meet all those needs on the other side, because you're going to have solved the problem, be creating an epic life for yourself. But your brain doesn't know that. Your unconscious mind doesn't know that. And so you get to teach it, train it, as they say. The next story that I was encouraged to tell is how I had a really odd and not very long bout with bulimia. So amidst all of these health problems, I'd also developed unknowingly, because no one told me, candida growth in my gut. And for anyone who doesn't know what candida is or hasn't had it before, it's horrible. It's basically like, let's just imagine there's like a whole bunch of like sugar hungry gremlins living inside your digestive tract. And all they want is sugar. and they're just connecting to your brain and all the different parts of your body. And like, they can take, like, it feels like they don't actually take control of your body, but it feels like they take control of your whole body when they want sugar. I had moments where there was one day at work, I worked in a retail store in a shopping center. There was one day that I ate 5 caramel slices. And I'm talking like I went to the cafe 5 times in one day. And I actually started going to different cafes to buy it from that day because I was embarrassed that I was coming back to buy another one and another one and another one. And I felt so ill. I was like, but I couldn't, the gremlins in my gut were like, sugar, give my sugar. And I had no idea what was going on. I just needed to have sugar. I was a monster. There was another night where, and this happened probably multiple times, but I went to the supermarket, gave in, I'm going to buy a block of chocolate, came home, ate it, threw it up, went back to the supermarket, bought a huge tub of ice cream, came home. I was like, that's all I'm going to have. Ate it, threw it up, went back to the supermarket a third time. It was only down the road. Oh, it's like 10 minutes down the road. Bought more chocolate and ice cream, came home, ate it, threw it up. Like, the whole thing that I was doing was a number of things. It was the candida taking over me and making me an insane person for sugar. It was getting a sugar hit, which was spiking my dopamine, because at the time I was so isolated and alone that I wasn't getting dopamine from anywhere. I wasn't getting any kind of good love chemicals from anywhere. So the combination of the candida and the lack of love in my life, I could get a hit from sugar. And then by throwing it up, I wouldn't have to deal with the digestive fallout, because if that stuff had all gone through my guts, I would have had weeks and weeks of challenges. However, in time, I learned that by throwing up my food, it's actually a gazillion times more detrimental on my microbiome. So what felt like a solution and a way to control all the crap that was happening that I felt like I couldn't control and wasn't getting any help with was actually making the situation worse in the long term. But I would learn that later. And what I was trying to do in this moment, as I said, was to gain some kind of control over my life, because I could barely control driving to work to make the money to pay the rent for the apartment that I lived in. I couldn't control how men were behaving in my life. I couldn't control that I couldn't get to see my family when I needed to. But I could control throwing up my food so that I wouldn't have to at least go through weeks of discomfort to digesting it, even though I still did anyway, because that was actually making it worse. And eventually, hard or not, this led me to have to look at healing the gut. And then from there, gatewayed on to balancing hormones, to changing the story. And in the end, reversing all of my other health issues. So I wouldn't have got there if I hadn't had that experience. And I know there's so many people who move through moments of an experience like that, of an eating disorder. Maybe it's a lifelong thing. Maybe you've been told that it'll never go away. And I'm here to tell you that it can, because I did it. I started it fully knowing that I probably shouldn't be doing this, but it was the only control that I had. So what did I do? Started going, well, how can I actually take back control of my life in other ways? I started creating morning routines for myself before this is over probably a decade ago. This is before anyone was online talking about morning routines. I started creating a morning routine. I would get up in the dark and I would either go on a hike somewhere by myself, because it had to be quite scary to stop me from just going and getting sugar and throwing it up. So that was the easy one. So I had to get myself up and out of the house, into the world, into the cold, into the darkness, put some music in my ears, and I would just run along the beach or hike a trail. And by the end of it, I would feel empowered. By the end of it, I probably smashed so much water that it at least helped my gut in some way before I was able to do it properly years down the track. And so I'm wondering if you're experiencing that or have experienced it. And then can you ask yourself, like I did, how can I create control or the awareness that I'm actually always in control in healthier ways. One of the most healthy ways to realize this is to realize how powerful the story is that we tell, how powerful our self-talk is. And of course, this is also our talk about others. In 2018, I did a 3-part series on YouTube about the power of our language, about our internal language, how we speak out into the world about ourselves, and then also the language and the conversations that we engage in with others. Because not only are we programming ourselves to feel and experience and see what we're telling ourselves constantly, whether we're aware of it consciously or not, but anything that we say to and about others is also programming us, not them. And so we have this incredible power of control in rewriting a story and telling a new story and using every moment where we might go to thinking the old thoughts or telling the old story or engaging in an old unhealthy conversation to flip it to our new one again and again and again. And I remember this being really challenging, both between taking back control with the bulimia or changing my story around sickness, because there was such an attachment to the attention that I got from it because it's all I had at the time. I had to create myself some like easy to remember one-liners after learning this so that I could go into my work, where I worked with over 100 people every single day who would always be asking me, how are you feeling? How's that symptom? How's this? How's that issue with that boy that you're upset over? And I would have to hold my tongue and go, I'm doing good today. I've decided that I'm healing. And all I would want to do is just go, oh my God, I still feel really shit. And I'm just telling the story because apparently it's supposed to help, but it feels like it's fake. Like I could have burst out and said all that anyway, or gone for the quick hit of complaining about it and getting the pity party. But I kept just defaulting to these one-liners and these little stories in this whole new direction, even though I didn't believe it. And what it did was it did lose me a lot of friends because they no longer had anything to talk to me about. Because in a way, people love people who talk about their problems because it distracts them from their own. When you stop talking about your problems, you may lose friends. And they weren't friends to begin with, right? But what it also did is I started to believe it. My body started getting stronger. I started seeing new people in the world and new things in the world that I hadn't seen before that ended up being the most simple solutions to my physical health needs. I started seeing better people in the world that I could hang out with to get that love and connection and to give it back, to be significant in healthier ways, to have variety of friends still and travel more and grow in self-development online, in all these new beautiful containers that I was finding in coaching opportunities and masterminds. And it just snowballed one after the other, all because I interrupted a story and a conversation that I'd been having that was keeping me in the exact thing that I didn't want. And I changed it to something else until I believed it, until I started to see it. Right? The third thing that people don't know that I went through, and this was only last year, was last year I experienced body dysmorphia for the first time. And while most of us have this experience at least once in our life, because it's going to happen, at some stage, you're going to probably be faced with I don't even know what is real. Like we're here on a rock, apparently flying through a universe and no one knows why. And we don't even know if that's real. And there's going to be all sorts of things that might challenge your reality. And this was one that I found so fascinating, but also really challenging for me because it brought up a lot of shadows from when I was young. So for those of you who were around last year, I had a major surgery to have the fibroid removed from my uterus finally. And that was a whole experience in and of itself. You can catch the podcast that I did about that last year. But for the months afterwards, I started experiencing something that I'd never experienced before. Now, I hadn't really been prepared for the impact of the surgery that could happen that I experienced. So anyone who's had a surgery before, they don't tell you, but apparently this is what they do. They pump a whole bunch of gas into you to open you up. So my whole belly was opened up, kind of like a C-section. And so in the time after surgery, I started realizing that I had all of this like loose skin. And I've always been in pretty good shape because I got fat when I was 13, and then I got really depressed, and then I made sure that I never got fat again, in all sorts of ways throughout my 20s, which also probably helped me become chronically ill. And looking at myself in this new way of like, I feel like some of the time I look in my reflection in a window or in a mirror and I look the way I normally look. I look pretty fit. I look like I usually do. But what was happening is a lot of the time I would see my reflection and I would see something totally different. I would see a girl who'd put on like 20 kilos. I would see mass amounts of cellulite that I'd never seen before, and I didn't know how it got there. I had all of this loose skin and I didn't know how to tone it, and everything that I was doing didn't seem to be making a shred of difference. It was sucky in the sense that I was like, well, this sucks because I work out all the time, I eat perfectly, I'm doing all the right things, and I look fat. And I just moved to the island, so of course I'm walking around like in very little clothing and I'm seeing my reflection everywhere, and that was fun on the mind. But what was really scary about it is that each time I saw a different version of myself in the reflection, it was sometimes such a drastic difference. I started questioning reality. I was like, well, what do I look like? Do I look like that to other people, or do I look like that? Because if I look like that to other people, like I'm not going to go out and date. Like I feel disgusting looking at myself like that. Why would anyone want to be with that? Like she clearly doesn't take care of herself. She clearly isn't doing okay. But then I catch myself in the mirror looking like I do and feel right now and be like, oh, I look like what? But yesterday I like, it was the most mind-bending experience to go through. And I've been through so many weird and wild human experiences. And this is why I eventually decided to become a coach over the years, because I realized that maybe I was having to go through all these multiple different wild, wonderful experiences and walk myself through them so that I could help people. And now I do. But this was such a mind-bending one. And it really made me face off with choosing to love myself no matter how I looked. And this was clearly a shadow that was still under the surface from the time when I was 13. And so when I was 13 and I put on a bunch of weight, I don't even know how I did it because we never kept yummy food in the house, but I did it somehow. My grandma passed away around the same time as we filed for bankruptcy as a family, and we lost our home. So there was a whole bunch of stuff going on that, of course, my beautiful parents never really fought outwardly. But of course, energetically, there was a lot going on the surface. So us kids would have been feeling that. And bless my parents, they did an amazing job with all the things that they went through, especially at that time. And so me putting on a bit of weight and feeling a little bit disconnected from the world was probably an easy price to pay, for myself anyway. And it was perfect because it created so many levels of drive in myself to really take care of my physical health in so many ways. And of course, to find all the ways that were healthy in later life. But there was still a lot of suppressed self-doubt and self-hatred and self-criticism suppressed within me from that time. And if I hadn't experienced these wild few months of body dysmorphia, not only would I not have sat with that 13-year-old version of myself, held her hand, done whole meditation journeys with her in my spare time, and asked her what she needed, gifted her some beautiful knowledge that I have now of how it's all going to be really amazing, and chose to love myself no matter what I was seeing in the mirror. It was like a magic trick. Things just got better and better. My body finally started responding to exercise, and all the foods that I was eating were amazing. And it was really phenomenal how quickly it shifted. with the experience that I was having with doubting my reality, like what is real if I don't even know what I look like, that guided me into new layers of energetic work, of quantum work, of work with my intuition, source, God, whatever you want to call it, and opened up a whole new success that I'd been really afraid of for years and years. Like I've always had access to really clear intuition, and I've always said things that are weird to other people that come from other places, whatever you want to call it. It's what makes me a really good coach, because I channel a lot. And if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have been almost forced to acknowledge that, well, we really don't know much at all. And I don't need to know much at all. What I get to create within myself is trust, no matter what is real and not real. And that's going way into the woo-woo, so we won't go too much further. We talk all about that inside Lovely Club and LRA. And it was really beautiful to go through another hard thing that I didn't expect just a year ago, to be guided to what I get to feel now, which is this phenomenal grounded sense of trust in my own quality of self-talk, my quality of how I talk about others, and how I see myself in the mirror, regardless of what day we're having. And, you know, some days I see the smile lines, and some days I see the crease in my forehead, which I refuse to do anything about, which is a whole nother podcast that I'm going to talk about later, being an elder millennial in the world of Botox and fillers and surgeries. Oh, it's a wild world we're living in. I'm a big proponent for all the challenges that we personally face along the way being the perfect concoction for us to have the massive transformation and cultivation of the life that we really want. Like the challenges that arise for us are actually perfect for all of our specific desires for the future. Because the challenges that arise for each and every one of us are to help us choose a new self and a new behavior and a new way of doing things than just the automatic program, or the way that the medical world might say, or the way that your mum might say, who maybe has never had to navigate it, right? You get to decide and design and devote yourself to building a level of awareness and connection with yourself, and then with the world around you, that shows you that you're actually in control of pretty much everything, that you're able to move through the world and impact the energy that you're moving through. And what you put out is what you get back. So every challenge that actually arises after you set the intention for a specific desire or goal is perfectly designed for you to get there. And so whatever challenges you might be going through right now, whether they are ones that I've talked about today or something totally different, if they are before you or within you, they're for you. They're for you to learn from, to draw wisdom from, to transcend from. That's where the desire actually is manifested. And so much of the time we set desires or goals for ourselves, and then challenge arises and we go, oh God, it's all too hard. Oh, maybe it's not meant to be. But that's an old mentality of people who never actually got the thing. The people who get the thing, whatever the thing is, whatever the ultimate desire or goal or outcome is that you want for your life, it's cliche, but it's on the other side. It's on the other side of the pain. It's on the other side of the discomfort. It's on the other side of the challenge that's being presented to you specifically. And if you want to learn how to work with your specific perfect concoction platter of challenges that might have been presented to you since setting your desire, then that's what I do. Come for a chat anytime. Come talk to me about LRA. And let's get you through the challenge to the good stuff, because all of those beautiful human needs can be met in the life of all of your desires being a reality. I'll see you on the next episode.